step out of the car. Now! Officer Nolan Pierce's voice cut through the drizzle like a blade. His hand hovered near his gun, eyes glassy with a volatile mix of adrenaline and something far darker. His uniform clung damp against his skin, beneath the pulsing red and blue lights. The black Mercedes idled in front of him, wipers dragging across the windshield in a rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Inside sat Chief Darius Hale, Chicago's chief of police, still wearing his badge on the dash, still gripping the steering wheel like a man who knew the law intimately and understood it might not solve him tonight. Nolan did not care. His finger twitched near the holster. He leaned closer, a smirk twisting his mouth. "Get out before I drag you out myself. Before we step deeper into this story, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and give this video a like, because what happens next is not fiction. It is a mirror, a reminder that one decision under flashing lights can lay bare the soul of an entire city. Chief Darius Hale had given many years to the Chicago Police Department. He had witnessed enough blood, betrayal, and bureaucracy to fill several lifetimes. That night, he was not chasing glory or political favor. He was simply driving home, exhausted, a confidential folder resting on the passenger seat, a thick file marked Internal Trafficking. Voss. He had been quietly investigating an arms ring buried inside his own department. The report contained serial numbers of missing rifles, forged evidence logs, and the names of officers tied to gun sales in South Side alleys. Darius planned to hand it to the federal inspector the following morning, but he never made it home. Officer Nolan Pierce was newly out of the academy, still fueled by his father's bitterness, a retired cop forced out during the consent decree. The older man had poured poison into his son's ears, stories of soft chiefs and political puppets. Nolan believed every word. He had been drinking from a silver flask hidden inside a water bottle, whiskey cutting through the chill as he patrolled 79th Street alone. When the sleek black Mercedes rolled past with one brake light dim, he saw opportunity rather than coincidence. He texted his friend and mentor, Sergeant Harlan Voss. "Big fish tonight. Might be our guy." Harlan answered instantly. "Make it quick. Call me if it's worth it." Darius noticed the flashing lights in his rearview mirror, the blue haze rippling across wet pavement. He sighed. Another night. Another stop. He rolled down his window and rested both hands on the wheel, every movement deliberate. He had taught younger officers this exact posture during community workshops. Stay calm, stay visible, keep your voice measured. He never imagined he would one day need his own training simply to survive. Nolan swaggered to the window, voice thick with contempt. "License and registration." Darius tilted his head. "Officer, I'm Chief Hale. You can call dispatch to confirm." Nolan's jaw tightened. "I don't care who you say you are. Step out." Darius studied the young man, restless, eyes darting. He caught the faint sting of alcohol and arrogance. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Nolan slammed his flashlight against the door. "You want to keep talking, or do you want to walk out?" Darius unlocked the door slowly and stepped into the cold drizzle, breath fogging under the lights. The wind carried the low hum of an approaching engine. Harlan's patrol SUV slid in from the corner, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Nolan grinned like a man who had just summoned his audience. Sergeant Harlan Voss, sharp-jawed, calm, and dangerous, stepped out and glanced at Darius without recognition, or pretended not to recognize him. He had been under Darius's scrutiny for weeks, aware the chief was close to exposing the arms racket. Tonight offered his chance to silence him. "Problem here, rookie?" Harlan asked, hand resting on his holster. Nolan spat. "Broken taillight. Drivers resisting." Darius exhaled. "That's a lie." Harlan smiled thinly. "Then you won't mind cooperating." Rain dripped from Darius's collar. "You two are walking into something you don't understand." Nolan cut him off with a shove. "Don't tell me what I don't understand." The shove became a grip, then a yank. Darius stumbled, shoulder slamming against the hood. "You're assaulting a superior officer," he said, still calm, still measured. But Harlan's presence emboldened Nolan. The rookie's fear twisted into rage, the kind that feeds on silence. He struck Darius across the face with his forearm. The sound cracked louder than thunder. Blood smeared the hood, thinned by the rain. A block away, an Uber driver named Malik Rivera slowed at the flashing lights. His passenger, a young nurse headed home, urged him to keep moving. But Malik's instincts told him something was deeply wrong. He parked a few feet away, phone hidden inside his jacket, camera already rolling, streaming live to his followers on X. "South Side, 79th Street, he whispered. "Looks like another bad stop." Darius straightened, one hand raised. "Pierce, that's enough." Nolan's pulse raced. He turned to Harlan for approval. Harlan nodded once. "Put him down." What followed was swift and brutal. Nolan hit him again, then again. Rain mixed with the sound of flesh and steel. Harlan joined in, boots crashing against ribs already broken. Darius gasped for air, blood foaming at his lips. Malik whispered into his phone, voice trembling. "They're beating someone. Wait. Oh my God, that's Chief Darius Hale." The comment section erupted in real time. In moments, hundreds of thousands of viewers were watching the stream. Darius collapsed against the pavement, hand clutching the folder that had slipped from his jacket. Pages fluttered out. Serial numbers, photos, signatures. Harlan saw them, froze, and cursed under his breath. He knows. Nolan did not hear. He was too busy screaming, "Stop resisting," at a man who could no longer breathe. Sergeant Lena Vargas was on duty nearby when the dispatch call came through. "Officer requests backup. 79th and Wallace. Possible assault suspect." She recognized Nolan's unit number and sped through the rain, tires slicing puddles, heart pounding. When she arrived, Darius lay face down, motionless. Nolan stood above him, breathing hard. Harlan looked pale, guilt carving deep lines into his face. Lena jumped out, voice cutting through the static. "What the hell are you doing? That's the chief." Nolan froze, color draining from his skin. Harlan whispered, "Body cams, turn them off." Lena's phone was already recording. She caught Harlan's voice clearly. "Delete the footage, now!" In that moment, Darius's eyelids fluttered. Blood ran from his nose into the rainwater. "Get Sophia," he murmured. His body went still again. Paramedics arrived quickly, lifting him into the ambulance. His pulse was shallow, breathing ragged. The live stream, still running, had already drawn hundreds of thousands of live views. Hashtags began forming. The city was waking up. Lena stood in the rain, shaking, watching the ambulance taillights fade. She knew this was no accident, no simple misjudgment. It was a setup that reached far higher than these two men. She looked down at her phone, the recording still rolling, Harlan's words still echoing. "Delete the footage, now." Those harrowing minutes under blue and red lights ignited a storm. Chicago would never forget. Chicago trembled under the weight of what it had witnessed. The video of those minutes traveled faster than any press release or official statement could contain. People woke to outrage buzzing through their phones, on buses, in coffee shops, at schools. The same question repeated in disbelief. Did that really happen to the chief? The footage, grainy yet unmistakable, showed Darius Hale being dragged, punched, and stomped by two of his own officers. His voice calm at first, then strained with pain, echoed through every feed. "I'm the chief." Even as the city mourned, the department stayed silent. The official statement called it a traffic misunderstanding, but no one believed the lie. Darius lay motionless in intensive care, tubes running from his mouth and chest, his left side outside wrapped in white bandages. Every breath was a struggle. The machines beeped in uneven rhythm, echoing the chaos outside. Doctors said he was lucky to be alive. Broken ribs, a punctured lung, deep bruising that would take time to heal. Sophia Hale sat beside him, hands clasped in prayer. She whispered through tears, "You've survived worse, Darius. You'll survive this, too." The nurse looked away, unable to hide the pity in her eyes. For all her years married to a police officer, Sophia had never imagined she would be the one waiting outside his hospital room because of police violence. Sergeant Lena Vargas arrived, still wearing her soaked uniform from the night before. She had barely slept. When she saw Darius lying there, her chest tightened. "I recorded everything," she said softly to Sophia. "They can't bury it this time." Sophia nodded without looking up. "Make sure the right people see it." Outside the room, reporters were already pressing against hospital security. The story was too big, too shocking, too symbolic to ignore. Across the city, Nolan Pierce sat alone in his small apartment, blinds closed, television flickering. Every channel showed his face. Every commentator called for his arrest. He had not eaten. His body ached from adrenaline withdrawal, his mind from guilt he refused to name. On his kitchen counter lay his badge, still wet from rain, beside a half-empty bottle of whiskey. He replayed the video on mute, watching himself drag Darius from the car, shouting words he could never take back. The uniform that once made him proud now felt like a costume soaked in disgrace. His phone buzzed, Harlan Voss calling. Nolan let it ring twice before answering. "You told me he was just some guy," he snapped. Harlan's voice was calm and cold. "And you believed me. Don't talk on the phone again." The line went dead. Harlan had problems of his own. He sat in a dark corner of the precinct tech room, deleting body cam files frame by frame. The footage could bury him and the arms trafficking network he ran inside the department. He wiped his forehead, whispering, "No trace, no case." When the door opened behind him, his heart jumped. Lena stood there, phone in hand, camera recording. "What are you doing, Voss?" Harlan froze. "Routine maintenance." She stepped closer. "You're deleting evidence." His eyes darted to the screen, then back to her. "Watch your tone, Sergeant. You don't know who you're messing with." Lena did not flinch. "I know exactly who I'm messing with. The reason our city is dying from the inside." Malik Rivera, the Uber driver who streamed the video, was hiding at his cousin's apartment. His live stream had reached nearly 1 million views in a short time. Reporters flooded his inbox. Activists called him a hero. Strangers called him a liar. He had already received threats on anonymous accounts. "You think you're safe?" one message read. "We know where you live." Malik turned on his phone camera and recorded himself, voice steady, though his eyes betrayed his fear. "If anything happens to me, the full footage goes to every outlet in the country." He uploaded it to an encrypted drive and sent copies to journalists he trusted. At City Hall, Mayor Evelyn Hart faced a storm of microphones and flashing cameras. She stood stiffly behind the podium, makeup cracking under bright lights. "The city of Chicago is deeply troubled by the events involving Chief Darius Hale," she began. "A full investigation is underway." Her words sounded rehearsed and bloodless until a reporter shouted, "Will you resign if he dies?" She froze, lips tightening. No further comments. She walked off stage to a chorus of boos. Soon protests filled the streets. Anger poured freely. Crowds gathered outside police headquarters, waving signs that read, "Justice for Darius," and no badge above the law. Some knelt in silence. Others shouted until their throats were raw. Lena Vargas stood at the back of the crowd, hood up, watching the sea of faces. For the first time, she understood what Darius had fought for throughout his career. Accountability that did not depend on who wore the uniform. Inside the hospital, Darius stirred. His eyelids twitched. His hand moved slightly. Sophia called the doctor, tears flooding her eyes. "Darius, can you hear me?" she whispered. He blinked once, then again. Moments later, his lips moved beneath the oxygen mask. His voice was weak, barely audible. "File in the car," he murmured. Sophia frowned. "What file?" He tried to lift his hand, but could not. "Voss," he whispered. "Find Voss." The machines beeped faster, his breathing turning shallow. Sophia gripped his hand tighter. "Rest, please." But Darius's eyes stayed open, filled with a fire that had not dimmed. Across town, Harlan sat in his car beneath a viaduct, scrolling through news articles, each one tightening the noose. "Officer Voss under investigation for possible cover-up." He tossed the phone aside and lit a cigarette. The smoke burned his throat, but he barely noticed. His world was shrinking fast. One hard drive, one leak, one confession away from collapse. His mind replayed Darius's words before the beating. "You're walking into something you don't understand." Maybe the chief had been right. Maybe Harlan had understood too much. A new piece of evidence surfaced online. A hacker calling himself Southside Ghost posted screenshots of recovered CPD messages. They showed Nolan and Harlan exchanging racist jokes, mocking supervisors, and discussing how to teach lessons to mouthy drivers. One message turned the nation's stomach. "He thinks being chief makes him untouchable." We'll remind him who runs the streets. The screenshots went viral within minutes. The department could no longer deny the truth. That night, the FBI arrived at the precinct with federal warrants. Agents in black jackets moved through the hallways, collecting drives and files, while officers watched in silence. Lena handed over her phone, still containing Harlan's voice ordering, "Delete the footage." An agent nodded. "You did the right thing." She said nothing, only stared at her badge, wondering when doing the right thing had become the most dangerous act of all. The hospital was quiet. Protests had turned into vigils outside. Hundreds stood in the street, holding candles, whispering prayers, the scent of wax and rain mingling in the air. Inside, Darius finally opened his eyes fully. He turned toward Sophia, voice barely more than a breath. "Tell them I'm not done yet." She nodded through tears, understanding. The fight was not over. It had only just begun. And as Chicago fell into uneasy sleep, somewhere in the darkness, a rookie cop sat trembling. A sergeant hid a copy of a recording in her locker, and a city waited to see what kind of justice would rise once the blue and red lights faded. The footage had reached 1 million views in a short time, and Chicago had become a boiling pot of rage and disbelief. Every television network replayed the same harrowing minutes. Chief Darius Hale bleeding on the pavement, while Nolan Pierce and Harlan Voss shouted commands no one believed. Darius's voice, so weary yet dignified, echoed across the nation. "I'm the chief." That line had already become a rallying cry. Outside City Hall, hundreds gathered with candles and signs, chanting it again and again, as though it were both prayer and warning. #Justice for Darius filled every corner of social media. Reporters arrived from across the country, turning Chicago's South Side into a living courtroom. Inside the precinct, officers avoided eye contact, whispering that the department would never be the same. Sophia Hale had not left her husband's side since the night of the attack. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and coffee, the kind that kept grief awake. Darius drifted in and out of consciousness, breathing uneven, yet his mind remained sharp whenever he surfaced. Sophia watched the news on a small television in the corner. Every segment ended with the same question. How could this happen to the city's own chief of police? When civil rights attorney Julian Crow entered, the air shifted. Tall, bald, thin from chemotherapy, yet his voice still carried the weight of a courtroom. He greeted her gently. "Mrs. Hale, I know it's soon, but we must move fast. They're already spinning the story." She looked at him with a teacher's calm fury. then spin it back. My husband deserves the truth, and this city deserves it too." Julian had seen police brutality cases before, but none like this. Victims were usually nameless, their stories buried beneath headlines that faded within days. This was the chief, the man who had built the department's reform task force, who had spent years trying to break the silence from within. Julian set down his briefcase and opened a file. Nolan Pierce, newly on the job, multiple internal complaints, all dismissed. One from a black teenager who said Pierce pulled a gun during a stop and called him boy. No follow-up. No discipline. Sophia closed her eyes, fighting the urge to scream. And Harlan, worse, Julian said, connected to an internal investigation about missing firearms, but the report vanished. Meanwhile, the mayor was drowning. Evelyn Hart had built her career on police loyalty, but loyalty now looked like complicity. Every journalist who approached her office asked questions she could not answer. Did she know about the arms trafficking ring? Did she ignore the complaints? Did she approve the promotions that placed Nolan and Harlan together? At an emergency council meeting, she tried to steady her voice. "Chicago will cooperate fully with federal investigators. We will hold those responsible to account." Behind the podium, her hands shook. Her deputy leaned close and whispered, "They're calling for your resignation." She whispered back, "Not yet. Not until I know what they have on me." Sergeant Lena Vargas worked in silence. She had not yet turned in the recording. The clip of Harlan ordering "delete the footage" was her insurance. She knew it would expose him, yet she also knew what happened to officers who crossed the wrong people. She had already received one anonymous text. "Keep your mouth shut, Vargas, or you'll be next." Still, she pressed on. She met Julian in a quiet diner on Pulaski Road and slipped a flash drive across the table. "Everything's on there," his voice, the timestamp, the cover-up. Julian took it carefully. "You understand this puts a target on your back." She nodded. "I've had one since I joined the force." The city split in two. Some saw Darius Hale as a hero, a man of integrity inside a rotting department. Others called him a traitor who had brought chaos upon himself by turning against his own. The police union held a press conference defending Nolan Pierce as a young officer caught in a tragic misunderstanding. Their spokesperson claimed he feared for his life during the stop. The lie spread like smoke. Commentators debated. Politicians argued. Truth drowned beneath the noise. But not everyone was fooled. Malik Rivera, still in hiding, went live again from an undisclosed location. "They said he resisted," he said to the camera, eyes red from exhaustion. "Watch the footage. He never raised a hand. The man was trying to breathe." His words cut through the digital fog. Within hours, protesters filled Michigan Avenue. The crowd was larger now. Students, veterans, mothers pushing strollers, even retired officers marching in silence. They carried signs bearing Darius's face and the words, "Cameras don't lie. People do." At the hospital that night, Darius woke fully for the first time. He blinked against the fluorescent glow. Sophia leaned close. "You're safe." He nodded weakly, voice rasping. "No one's safe. Not yet." She squeezed his hand, tears threatening. "Julian is taking your case. Lena gave him the evidence." He tried to sit up but grimaced. "They'll come after her. Protect her." Sophia nodded. "We will." Then his eyes drifted toward the ceiling, far away. "They broke more than bones," he murmured. "They broke the illusion that we were past this." The next day, Julian held a press conference outside the courthouse, voice clear and unshaken. "We will file a federal civil rights lawsuit on behalf of Chief Darius Hale and his family. This is not only about 2 rogue officers. It is about a department that looked away. It is about a system that punishes silence but protects brutality." Cameras flashed. One reporter asked, "Are you seeking damages?" Julian nodded. $10 million, $5 million compensatory, $5 million punitive. But no dollar can repair what was broken here. Back at the precinct, Harlan watched the press conference from his office, sweat dripping down his temples. He had been suspended, but not yet charged. Every hour felt borrowed. He called Nolan 3 times. No answer. When he finally reached him that night, Nolan's voice sounded slurred and hollow. "They know everything, Harlan. I can't sleep. I see his face every time I close my eyes." Harlan's tone was cold. "Then don't close them." He hung up, lit another cigarette, and stared out the window as rain streaked the glass. Thousands gathered at Millennium Park for a candlelight vigil. It was quiet at first. Soft music, rain dripping from umbrellas, and Sophia Hale's steady voice at the microphone. "My husband believed in the badge. He believed it could stand for justice, not fear. But tonight we know that belief is fragile. We must protect it together." The crowd clapped slowly, then cheered. Candles flickered like small flames of defiance. The mayor's office received confirmation that federal investigators were moving in. Subpoenas arrived for body cam logs, text messages, and deleted files. The department's walls, once built on silence, began to crack. Officers whispered that the FBI now held copies of everything. Harlan panicked, deleting more data, unaware Lena's backup had already reached Washington. Chicago had seen what it was never meant to see. A black police chief, beaten nearly to death by men sworn to serve beneath him. It was no longer about one traffic stop. It was a mirror reflecting every injustice the city had buried for decades. Though Darius still lay in a hospital bed, eyes open, breath shallow, a storm had already begun moving through every level of power. Justice was coming, slow but unstoppable, carried by the weight of one truth. The world had finally watched, and this time it was not looking away. The days that followed blurred into secrets, fear, and unraveling lies. Chicago's air felt heavy, as though the city itself held its breath. In public, the mayor's office promised transparency. Behind closed doors, files were shredded, hard drives wiped, phones mysteriously lost. Every meeting ended with lawyers whispering, "Don't talk to the press. Don't talk to the feds." But the truth had already leaked through too many cracks. Lena Vargas knew it was only a matter of time before someone tried to silence her too. She lived on black coffee and adrenaline, moving carefully between her apartment and the precinct each night. She backed up her recordings twice, one copy in her locker, one hidden in a safe deposit box. And every morning, a new threat arrived on her phone. "We know what you did. You'll lose your badge for this." Fear was real, yet the cause was stronger. She had promised Sophia Hale she would protect the evidence, and she would not break that promise. Nolan Pierce was collapsing under guilt and paranoia. His face had become a national symbol of disgrace, played on every talk show, every news crawl, every social feed. He stopped going outside, too afraid of cameras, too haunted by the silence that followed his name. His father, once a proud Chicago cop, had publicly disowned him, calling him a coward who disgraced the uniform. Nolan drank constantly to drown the noise, but the noise never stopped. He saw Darius's face in every reflection, heard his voice in every creak of the apartment. One night, drunk and desperate, he called Harlan. "I can't do this anymore." Harlan's tone was icy. "Do what?" "Lie," Nolan said, words slurred. "You said it was just a scare. You said no one would get hurt." Harlan exhaled slowly. "You think the city cares about you? They'll bury you before they bury me." Then he hung up. Harlan was losing control too, though he would never admit it. He had always believed himself untouchable, a master of the system he helped corrupt. For years he had run a lucrative arms network, moving seized weapons out of evidence storage and into the streets through third-party contractors. Easy money. Until Darius Hale started asking questions. Darius had connected the dots, missing serial numbers, unlogged seizures, falsified paperwork. Now Harlan's world was closing in. Federal subpoenas had arrived. Investigators were picking apart every document. He felt the walls tightening, oxygen thinning. Still, he refused to go down quietly. He reached out to an old contact in internal affairs, Detective Corbin, the same man who had helped cover his tracks years earlier. "I need a favor," Harlan said over the phone. "The files, everything Darius had on me, it's still out there." Corbin's voice was dry. "Then find it before the Bureau does." But Lena had already found it. She met Julian Crow in the back booth of a quiet restaurant near Union Station. Rain tapped the window as she slid a thin envelope across the table. Inside were photos, ledgers, and a flash drive. "This is what he was carrying that night," she said. "The original report Darius compiled on the arms ring. Harlan's name is all over it." Julian studied the papers, hands trembling slightly. "This is enough to bury them, but it'll bury you too, if you're not careful." Lena managed a tired smile. "I've been buried in silence for years, counselor. I'd rather go down fighting." A new attack unfolded online. Southside Ghost posted encrypted messages claiming to have cracked the department's internal cloud. Within hours, screenshots appeared showing numerous text exchanges between Nolan Pierce and Harlan Voss. Messages laced with racism, arrogance, and cold intent. One in particular shook the city. "Chief thinks he's a hero. Let's remind him who runs this city." Another, "If we rough him up a little, maybe he'll back off the investigation." The screenshots spread like wildfire. Reporters confirmed the metadata was authentic. It was no longer a question of guilt. It was a countdown to justice. Mayor Evelyn Hart watched her career implode in real time. Her own emails were now under review after whispers emerged that she had received campaign donations from consultants tied to the same gun distributors Harlan protected. Her chief of staff urged her to get ahead of the scandal, but Evelyn refused. "I've served this city for many years. I won't step down over rumors." Soon, protesters surrounded City Hall, chanting her name alongside the officers. "Clean house now." She looked out at the crowd below, thousands she had once called her voters, and knew her time was running out. Back at the hospital, Darius was growing stronger, though each breath still carried pain. He watched the protests from his bed, while Sophia held the tablet for him. "You started something," she whispered. "Something bigger than both of us." Darius shook his head slowly. "No, they started it. I'm just finishing what they began." His voice was hoarse, but resolve had returned. When Julian arrived that evening, Darius insisted, "I want to testify." "You're not ready," Julian replied, broken ribs, half a lung. Darius met his eyes. "And I've got a department bleeding from the inside. My body will heal. The truth won't wait." Malik Rivera, the man who filmed everything, had gone into hiding under federal protection. Even in seclusion, his story reached the world. He gave his first interview via video call, face shadowed for safety. "I didn't mean to be a hero. I just couldn't look away." He told the reporter about recording the live stream, watching the chief crumble beneath those blows, and realizing what he had captured. "I thought I was filming another beating. Turns out I was filming history." His words resonated. Donations poured in to cover legal fees and relocation. America had chosen its witness, and his testimony was unstoppable. Harlan's fear turned to desperation. He met Nolan in an abandoned parking lot behind a shuttered bar on the west side. City lights barely touched them. Nolan looked gaunt, hollow-eyed, clutching a half-empty bottle. "You ruined my life," he said, voice shaking. "You told me it'd be fine." Harlan smirked, trying to keep control. "You wanted in, remember? You wanted to be respected." Nolan's voice rose. "I wanted to be a cop, not a criminal." He pulled out his phone. "The feds called me. They want me to talk." Harlan lunged, grabbing his arm. "You talk and you die broke." Nolan yanked free. "I already am." He got into his car and drove into the night. By morning, Nolan had checked himself into a federal holding facility under witness protection. His statement was scheduled. The dominoes were ready to fall when word reached Harlan. He smashed his phone against the wall, the last shred of his control shattering with it. That evening, Lena met Darius once more. He sat upright right now, pale but alert. "You were right," she said. "They'll burn the whole department to save themselves." Darius looked at her with quiet gratitude. "Then let's make sure the fire hits the right hands." Outside, the city buzzed with anticipation. The leaks, the lies, the betrayals, all of it was coming to light. The people had taken back the narrative, and for the first time, the blue wall was beginning to crack. The men who thought they ran the streets were about to face the one thing they could not outrun: truth under oath. As the skyline glowed against the night, Chicago braced itself for a trial that would test not only its justice system, but its soul. The trial began on a gray morning when the city seemed to hold its breath. The federal courthouse was packed beyond capacity. Reporters filled every seat. The hallway outside overflowed with protesters holding signs that read, "Cameras don't lie," and "Justice for Darius." Inside, fluorescent lights hummed above a sea of tense faces. Chief Darius Hale sat at the plaintiff's table, beside attorney Julian Crow, posture straight despite the stiffness in his ribs. Across the room, Nolan Pierce stared at the table, hands trembling, suit hanging loose from weight loss. Harlan Voss sat beside him, pale and alert, his lawyer whispering constantly. The judge entered. The room rose. The nation was watching. Julian opened with calm precision. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will see a video of those harrowing minutes. You will watch two police officers assault their superior officer, your city's chief of police. You will hear him identify himself. You will see him beg for breath, and you will watch them keep going. This case is about more than brutality. It is about betrayal from within the badge itself. The defense tried to frame it as confusion, a late-night stop gone wrong. Nolan's attorney, Langford, insisted his client feared for his life. He thought the chief was an armed suspect. It was raining, dark, chaotic. The jury's faces told the truth. No one believed it. Then, Julian pressed play. The room fell silent. Rain glinted in the headlights. Darius's calm voice said, "Officer, I'm the chief." Then the shove, the punches, the blood, the final blow. Even the sound of rain could not mask the horror. Several jurors looked away. One woman covered her mouth. When the video ended, silence held for nearly 30 seconds before the judge spoke. "Proceed." Next came the body cam footage Lena had recovered. Nolan yelled, "Stop resisting," again and again. Yet Darius never fought back. Then, after the assault, Harlan's voice clearly said, "Delete the footage. Now." Lena sat in the witness box, eyes fixed on the defense table. "That was his voice," she said, pointing to Harlan. "I was there. He ordered it." The defense objected. The judge overruled. "Let the record show Sergeant Vargas has confirmed the voice identification." Harlan's mask began to crack. His lawyer whispered frantically, but the damage was done. Lena continued, explaining how Darius had been investigating missing weapons before the attack. She described the rain, the chaos, the moment she found her chief on the ground. "He wasn't just my boss," she said quietly. "He was the one man trying to clean up this department." Then Malik Rivera took the stand. The crowd leaned forward. He wore a dark suit, voice measured, eyes weary, but steady. "I was in the Uber. I saw everything. I streamed it because I didn't think anyone would believe it without proof." The prosecutor asked, "Did you know who the man was at first?" Malik shook his head. "No. But when I heard him say he was the chief, I froze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing." Julian played a short segment of the live stream. Malik's trembling voice whispered, "They're beating someone. Oh my God, that's Chief Darius Hale." The courtroom fell silent again. By the second day, the defense grew desperate. Harlan's attorney tried to claim tampering. Julian rose calmly, holding up the chain of custody report signed by federal agents. "Every frame was verified, and we have metadata showing Officer Voss himself attempted to delete it." He displayed the recovered text messages between Nolan and Harlan. The screen filled with words soaked in racism and arrogance. He thinks being chief makes him untouchable. We'll show him. Gasps filled the room. Harlan's lawyer objected, but it was futile. The jury had read the truth. On the third day, Nolan broke. He had refused to testify, fearing perjury, but conscience and evidence finally cracked him. Under oath he spoke haltingly, voice thin and defeated. I was drunk. Harlan told me to make the stop. He said the chief was dirty. I just wanted to prove myself. His lawyer buried his face in his hands. Julian's tone was controlled, but sharp. Did you know it was the chief? Yes, Nolan whispered. I knew. I didn't care. I thought I was doing the right thing. The room stayed silent. Every word another nail in his coffin. Then came the most devastating testimony. Darius himself. The courtroom rose as he entered, moving carefully, every step slow but deliberate. He wore his dark suit, police pin on the lapel, jaw still stiff from the fracture. At the stand, he paused and looked directly at the jurors. I gave my life to that department, he said softly. I believed in it, even when it didn't believe in me. That night, I wasn't just a man beaten on the street. I was the symbol of every black citizen who's been told to obey first, speak later. When I said, I'm the chief, I wasn't pleading for special treatment. I was pleading for humanity. Several jurors wiped their eyes. Even the judge shifted uncomfortably. Closing arguments began. Julian's words were steady as stone. This case isn't about revenge. It's about responsibility. The badge is supposed to mean honor. But when that badge is used as a weapon, it loses all meaning. Chief Hale didn't just survive an assault. He survived a betrayal by the very system he swore to uphold. Now it's your turn to uphold something. The truth. The jury deliberated for several hours. Outside, thousands gathered in the rain, waiting. Reporters stood ready. Cameras aimed at the courthouse doors. When the clerk finally read the verdict, the city seemed to exhale all at once. Nolan Pierce was guilty on all counts: assault under color of authority, civil rights violation, and obstruction. Harlan Voss was guilty on conspiracy, evidence tampering, and accessory to attempted murder. The jury awarded Darius Hale $10 million, $5 million compensatory, $5 million punitive. Gasps filled the courtroom. Sophia pressed her hand to her face, sobbing quietly. Lena leaned forward, whispering a silent thank you. As the officers were led away in handcuffs, Darius did not look at them. He kept his gaze on the judge, on the seal of justice above her head. Cameras captured his quiet exit, steps slow, but unbroken. Reporters shouted questions, but he did not stop. He said only one thing before stepping into the rain. Cameras don't lie. People do. That night, Headlines echoed across the country. Chief Hale wins historic civil rights case. Chicago officers convicted in brutality trial. But for Darius, it was not victory. It was survival. Reform had begun. Yet the wounds were far from healed. As he stood at his hospital window later that night, watching city lights flicker, he knew the hardest work still lay ahead. The trial was over. The reckoning had only just begun. The months after the verdict brought no peace, only the quiet exhaustion that follows a storm. Justice had been delivered in the courtroom, but the city Darius Hale had sworn to protect was still bleeding. The $10 million settlement made headlines, yet behind the scenes, the scars ran deeper. Nolan Pierce began his federal sentence at a low-security prison in Wisconsin. He arrived thinner, pale, hollow-eyed, carrying only his Bible and regret that arrived too late. He was beaten twice in his first week by inmates who recognized him from the viral video. In the weeks that followed, he filed for bankruptcy. His wife filed for divorce, taking their daughter to her parents' home in Michigan. Guards found him unconscious in his cell after swallowing painkillers. He survived but was placed under constant observation. When released, no police department would hire him. He took a job as a mall security guard in Gary, Indiana, uniform without authority, badge without meaning. Sometimes customers recognized him. He learned to keep his head down. Harlan Voss fared no better. Cooperation at trial had reduced his sentence, but freedom brought no redemption. His wife left him. The courts took custody of his son. Old connections vanished overnight. Within months of release, he was back on the streets, jobless, addicted, sleeping beneath the viaduct off 79th Street, where he once patrolled. Reporters found him there one winter morning, wrapped in a torn blanket. When asked if he regretted what happened, Harlan said nothing. He only stared at the concrete and muttered, "It was supposed to be just a stop." His silence said the rest. Mayor Evelyn Hart's fall came slower, but just as hard. The federal probe into campaign donations uncovered financial ties to the gun distributors Darius had been investigating. Though never criminally charged, her political career ended. She resigned months after the trial. Her final speech was drowned by protesters demanding reform. Her name was removed from the police reform committee she had once chaired. Eventually, she disappeared from public life, leaving behind a city desperate to believe the worst was finally over. Darius Hale refused to retire quietly. Injuries had left him weaker, yet his voice had grown stronger. The settlement became seed money for the Justice Legacy Fund. dedicated to victims of wrongful police conduct and community surveillance initiatives. The first project installed numerous public cameras across the South Side, independent of police control, managed by neighborhood councils. "If the system can watch us," Darius said at the ribbon cutting, "then we can watch the system too." His words echoed nationwide. Similar programs soon appeared in Detroit, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. Lena Vargas was promoted to deputy chief, the first Latina to hold the title in Chicago's history. Her courage made her a reluctant hero. She restructured the department's internal review board, bringing civilian oversight and mandatory bias audits. Yet she knew reform remained fragile. Every week another complaint crossed her desk, another reminder that culture does not change with a single verdict. Still, she pressed on. "We owe him that much," she said in interviews. "Not just Darius, the idea of what he stood for." Malik Rivera's life transformed completely. His book, I Filmed the Truth, became a bestseller and was adapted into a documentary. Time magazine named him Person of the Year, calling his act the click that changed Chicago. But fame brought guilt. "I didn't save him," he said in an interview. "I just recorded what the world refused to see." He used his platform to advocate for transparency laws and citizen oversight, insisting every bystander had the right to film police interactions without interference. His quiet determination turned him into a national voice for accountability. For Darius, the months after the trial were a paradox of healing and mourning. The Justice Legacy Fund grew beyond expectation. Donations from across the country, partnerships with civil rights groups, even a grant from the Department of Justice. Yet every success reminded him of the night that birthed it. He often returned to the intersection on 79th Street, standing silently beneath the same flickering light where he had been beaten. When reporters asked why, he answered simply, "Because I lived where too many didn't." Nolan's failed suicide attempt became a headline for a time, then faded. Harlan's overdose months later barely made the papers. Darius did not celebrate their ruin. When asked, he said, "Justice isn't vengeance, it's balance. And sometimes balance takes everything from everyone." His humility earned respect even among those who once doubted him. Later, Darius was invited to speak before the National Police Conference in Washington, D.C., the hall filled with chiefs, cadets, and policymakers. He walked slowly to the podium, faint scar along his lip catching the light. Cameras flashed, but he ignored them. "We wear these uniforms to protect what's right, not to hide what's wrong. The badge doesn't make us immune from judgment. It binds us to it." His speech ended in quiet applause that swelled into a standing ovation. Yet, as he stepped off stage, he saw a young officer in the hallway quietly removing his body cam battery before heading out on patrol. Darius stopped and watched. He said nothing. He only closed his eyes for a moment. The cycle, it seemed, still lived in shadows. That night, as Chicago's lights glimmered in the distance, Darius sat in his office, looking out over the skyline. Justice had come, but not closure. The wounds were too deep, the system too vast. Still, he believed progress was possible, slow, imperfect, yet real. The world had watched him fall and rise again, and in that story he hoped others might find courage to stand. Outside, sirens echoed faintly, red and blue lights painting the walls once more. He whispered the words that had carried him through every trial. Cameras don't lie. People do. Then he turned off the light and went back to work. The morning after the conference speech, Chicago woke under a pale sunrise, skyline still damp with fog. For the first time in years, the streets felt quiet, not peaceful, but watchful, as though the city itself were deciding what kind of place it wanted to be. Chief Darius Hale walked slowly through his old precinct, the one where everything had begun. Officers nodded with respect now, some out of guilt, others out of fear. But Darius knew change was not about silence. It was about courage. The Justice Legacy Fund had begun to take root. Community patrols, body cam transparency, civilian review panels. Yet he understood reform was never permanent. It had to be fought for daily, breath by breath. Outside the precinct, murals of him began to appear. Darius with badge held high under rain-streaked lights. Malik Rivera painted one himself on the same corner where he had filmed the attack. It wasn't about hero worship, Malik told a reporter. It was about memory. People forget too easily. This wall will remind them that truth needs witnesses. His book had sold many copies. His documentary had just won an award at Sundance. Fame had not softened him. He still spent weekends teaching Southside teens how to film safely and protect their footage. "The phone is the new shield," he said. "You hold it steady, and the world sees what power tries to hide." Lena Vargas was now deputy chief. Her office overlooked the same district she once patrolled in a squad car. She carried herself differently, not with pride, but with gravity. Every decision carried a moral echo. How much could be fixed, and how much would only repeat? She met with Darius twice a week, updating him on consent decree expansion, disciplinary reviews, and mentorship programs for new recruits. "We're improving," she said one afternoon, "but we're still bleeding trust." Darius looked out the window, voice low. "Then stop patching wounds. Start healing the cause." Nolan Pierce was released from prison around that same period. He looked older than his years, beard unkempt, eyes sunken. No department would touch him. No neighborhood wanted him. He found work at a security firm in Gary, watching empty hallways through dusty monitors. Sometimes at night, he played the old footage, the video that had ruined him, and stared at the frozen image of his own rage. He no longer recognized the man on screen. Once, he told a fellow guard, "I thought I was serving justice. Turns out I was running from it." A week later, he quietly moved away, leaving no address behind. Harlan Voss did not live long after release. Addiction consumed what prison had left undone. He was found beneath a bridge that winter, body identified only by a faded police tattoo. When reporters asked Darius for comment, he refused. Later, in private, he said, "There's no satisfaction in watching a man destroy himself. Accountability isn't revenge, it's the line between truth and hate." Sophia Hale spent her time managing the Justice Legacy Fund's scholarship program, offering grants to families affected by police violence. She often reminded Darius that survival carried a responsibility greater than memory. "You didn't just live through it," she told him. "You lived so others could believe again." Together, they built partnerships with universities, training programs, and mental health services for officers and citizens alike. The year concluded with a ceremony at City Hall. The new mayor, a young reform candidate, declared the anniversary of the traffic stop as Justice Legacy Day. Schools held assemblies. Officers spoke at community centers. The city pledged to reduce racial disparities in stops significantly within a few years. It was a start, fragile but real. That evening, Darius stood alone outside his car at the same intersection where it all began. The street was dry now, lamplight steady. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors, officers, reporters, all waiting for him to speak. He brought no notes. He simply said, "Every city has two lights, blue and red. One warns, one protects, but for too long they've blurred together until people can't tell which is which. Our job is to separate them again, to make justice shine brighter than the year." His words lingered in the cool night air as the crowd applauded. Darius looked down the block and saw a new patrol car parked under the same flickering lamp. A rookie sat inside, checking his gear. For a brief moment, Darius thought he saw the young man reach for his body cam switch, then hesitate, leaving it off. The old ache returned. Change, he knew, was not a victory march. It was a cycle that demanded vigilance. He turned to Lena beside him. "Promise me something," he said quietly. "Never let the light go out." She nodded. "Not on my watch." Later that night, back in his office, Darius opened the window and listened to the city hum. Sirens, laughter, footsteps, all the sounds of a city learning to breathe again. On his desk sat the gavel he had received from a community coalition engraved with the words, "Truth has no badge." He smiled faintly, turned off the lamp, and whispered into the silence, "Cameras don't lie. People do. But sometimes people learn." The story of Chief Darius Hale became a lesson taught in police academies nationwide, not as tragedy, but as proof of endurance. Reform spread city by city, imperfect yet alive, carried by those who refused to forget. And under the lights of Chicago's South Side, where rain once turned to blood, the glow that remained was not merely red or blue, but something brighter, something earned. Thank you for watching and supporting this story. If you believe in justice and truth, subscribe, like, and tell me where you're watching from. Your voice matters.